Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast, where we discuss health education and how to best teach health ed in the K 12 setting.
Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast. I'm your host, Lori Reichel. And Happy New Year to you out there. I hope everything's going really well. And I'm really excited about this episode because it's on a topic that is tough to talk about, so we need to be updated. And I have an expert in the field to talk about this topic. First, let me tell you what the topic is. It's on sextortion. And we'll even have the guest today talk about what that is, like define that. And our guest today is Saleema Noon, who I've had the pleasure to meet through the Sex Education Alliance. Kim Cook put that together a couple of years ago. Saleema is one of the people referred to on the website because she is a resource for how to talk to young people about sensitive topics. So Saleema, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for having me. You know, I always love to chat with you.
It's so neat to reconnect with you. So Saleema was on the Puberty Prof podcast, and now she's on the School Health Educators podcast. And would you tell us a little bit about your background before we jump into today's topic?
Sure. I am a sexual health educator based in Vancouver, Canada. And for the past 25 years, I've been teaching comprehensive sexual health education in the form of what I call body science workshops for students kindergarten through middle school and their parents. I also have two online learning platforms featuring all of the workshops that I teach in person. And one of them centers around sexual health education. The other one centers around how teachers and parents can empower preteens to face their teen years in a way that they feel prepared and confident and less stressed. So in addition to the in-person workshops I offer, I've also created those online platforms with the goal of supporting teachers in the classroom to plug and play, to provide their students a curriculum that they find engaging and enjoyable, and just take that off their plate. Because you and I both know, Lori, that teachers already have so much going on. So they need support, especially when it comes to, like you said, some sensitive topics. We don't expect teachers to just feel super comfortable, bringing up topics like sextortion or sex education generally with their students. And I'm not sure, I know the situation is different everywhere, but what I can say that is that in British Columbia, where I live, teachers aren't given adequate training and time and background information and up-to-date resources to bring the curriculum to life. And that's why I spend a lot of time supporting them through that.
And thank you for doing that. And that's the purpose behind this whole podcast, is to provide another tool for school health educators to go to, because we don't have a lot of time when we're teaching and we have so many preps and we have so many IEP plans or other plans, because there's so many needs with our students who we love. And then we have families and administrators that are also asking us questions and are making all these requests. So I appreciate that the work that you do, Saleema, and for updating us. So I really do appreciate your time today. And
Yeah,
I
and that's
love,
the big story. I mean, our world is changing. The world our kids live in is
yeah,
changing faster than we could ever imagine. And not only that, but a good portion of their life, especially their social life, is happening online. And it's
yeah.
a world that we as adults just don't always know what it's like. And so for your average teacher, I mean, they try their best to stay up to date with what's relevant to their students' lives, but I try to just make that process easier for them.
I love how earlier you used the words empower, or the word empower, which is something, it's one of my favorite words, because as educators, our role is to provide tools for young people, not to tell them what to do, but to help them make the best decisions for themselves, learning from their mistakes. Because one day they're going to be these young adults and then older adults, and they're going to be more independent, which is why we're raising them. And then they'll work on interdependency too in a lot of different positions. So I love that you use the word empower. And before we jump into the topic of sextortion, I would like to remind my colleagues out there that when we have a sensitive topic that might be challenging for us to teach because it is dealing with something I wish didn't happen, remember to not just jump into the topic and just start teaching on it. You have to approach it professionally. You start slowly, like if this is going to be part of a self-management unit where you're talking about human sexuality, this isn't the first lesson. This is something that's gradually raised, and make sure you have a support team, which I'm sure Saleema is going to remind us of as she talks about the topic today.
And I think it goes a long way for teachers to, help their students understand that, yeah, this is something that's difficult to talk about and it's important. And so I'm going to do my best. I know you deserve to have this information, and help them rise to the challenge. Sometimes when we feel uncomfortable or anxious or even scared, our reaction is to be silly and giggly at every age.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important for teachers to trust their students, to have the maturity required to have an adult conversation about this important topic.
Yeah. So, do you mind defining in your own words what sextortion is?
Sure. I think just to back up a little bit, Lori, let's talk about sending nudes.
Okay.
Sending nudes, a lot of adults refer to it as sexting, so
Mm-hmm.
sending sexual text messages. Young people refer to it as sending nudes, and a nude is basically a sexual image or video of someone. Now, this is something I used to have to talk about at the high school level years ago. Now, it absolutely is relevant even to upper elementary aged kids, so grade 6 and 7s. That's when I start bringing this up because, as I mentioned earlier, and as we all know, our kids are socializing online. They're online. Their relationships are progressing on social media. And so we really need to address this as something that is real in their life. Sextortion specifically takes sending nudes to what I think is a whole new scary level. It's a form of online sexual violence that involves threats to expose sexual images if certain demands aren't met, whether that's sending money or gift cards or doing certain things. It can take many forms, but it is a form of sexual violence.
Just hearing that, I get stuck because I don't understand why we have to have this conversation because it shouldn't be happening. And please feel free to take the lead here, Saleema, because for some reason, I've just been hearing a lot of stuff on social media about this and some of the stories, and it saddens me. It breaks my heart, if I say it like that.
It's true. It's something we wish we didn't have to talk about with our students and our kids, but we absolutely have to. Now, based on my work with teachers and parents, I have come up with just 5 basic things I would love for teachers to be able to convey to their students about this topic. So first of all, number 1 is that we need to make sure that kids know what this means. We're not talking sending nudes between peers, which at every grade level, I say is not a good idea. I tell kids, I don't like to give people your age hard no's, but when it comes to sending nudes, it's a hard no, because the internet is the most public space we have, and our bodies and our sexuality are the most private, special, important things we own. So the two just don't go together. Now, when we're adults, then as adults, we can choose how we want to share our sexuality with others and how public we want that to be. But because the consequences are so dire, especially for young people, it's a hard no. Now, sending nudes,
If I can interject, so
please.
right away, I want to start having this argument with you, like as a kid, to say, and this isn't to you personally, this is
Yeah.
me like thinking like a kid.
Mhm.
It's, I would say to you, Yeah, but there are a lot of famous people that do this. So why is it so bad for me, but not for them?
Well, yes, lots of people do it, including famous people. And when people do it, my hope is that they have the life experience under their belt to really truly understand what the consequences are that can come out of it. As you know, young people love hearing stories, right? That
Hmm.
just makes what I'm saying real. It gives me cred. And so, they understand when I tell them stories of situations I've had to deal with in my work. It's way too often that I'm called to schools where, let's say, two grade 7 students are crushing on each other. And we know from research, it's usually the boy, if we're talking heterosexual relationships, it's usually the boy who requests a nude and the girl who initially says no, but then for whatever reason, no judgment, decides to send it. Well, of course, the boy pretends or promises rather that they won't show anyone, but they do. So we talk about, well, if someone promises they're not going to show anyone else a nude, why would they do that? And the
Right.
student immediately said, well, he wants clout. He wants approval from his peers. He wants to be cool. Lori, when you and I were growing up, I think we're around the same age. We called it, being a pimp, a player, a stud, a stallion. It's that approval that young people are seeking from their peers. So, okay, so they share it. And what are the ramifications of that? Well, first of all, sharing a photo, sexual or not, of someone without their consent is against the law. What also students don't quite understand is that sending a nude to someone without them having requested it is against the law as well. It's considered to be sexual harassment in Canadian law, and I'm assuming that US law would be similar.
Absolutely.
So if we can share examples, real life
Hmm.
examples of how these consequences impact young people in a major way. I tell students how I've worked with too many grade 7 students who have thought about changing schools in the middle of the school year. And in Canada, grade 7 is typically when elementary school ends and high school begins. I mean, that's how emotionally and socially impactful these situations can be. And we would never want, especially a young person, to be in that situation. It's just too difficult and too devastating.
And that's where, like, I'm so glad you said, it's a legal thing. That's one thing in which I could perceive some young people going, yeah, it's legal, mumbo jumbo, it might not get caught. But you said that emotional aspect, that's the concern. That's the how people can be mean to one another, increase the harassment, and it's that's why so many young people want to be in another spot. And part of growing up is sometimes you make decisions where you wish you didn't make that decision, and we learn from that. That's how a lot of our learning happens, is sometimes making a mistake first, and people
Yeah.
don't have the right to judge people on that. At the same time, when you have this happen, to learn from this mistake, there's so many emotions and so many people, they are judging in a way, and it's hard.
And we can't forget the incredible power of gender stereotypes in these situations,
Yeah.
right? Again, not much has changed since we were growing up. That double standard is still alive and well. I tell my students, the guy who shared the photo without consent, he does get clout. He's cool. If you're the
Hmm.
guy who gets nudes from a hot girl, you're cool. It's a good thing in boy world. But pretty
Right.
quickly, the girl who sent the nude, regardless of the circumstances it was sent under, she gets branded as a slut and a skank and a hoe, which is the opposite of good in girl world. And
Right.
so it's not fair playing ground, especially for girls. The consequences of sharing nudes are dire.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, sextortion takes this to a whole new level because it involves extortion. It involves sexual violence, online violence, and an imbalance in power because we know from research that typically the predator in sextortion situations is older than the victim, right?
Yeah. So I appreciate that you allowed me to go to that, just the selfie and all that. And then if we can return to, then what are the five things you help preteens learn about
Yeah.
this? Like, what are the five things?
So yeah, the first thing I would love for teachers to be able to convey to their students is exactly what are we talking about? We're not talking sending nudes between friends, crushes, peers. We're talking when someone online victimizes another person without their knowledge. The second thing I would like young people to know is that kids between the ages of 10 to 17 are at highest risk of being sextorted. And this actually surprised me when I learned it, Lori. The most vulnerable are boys between the ages of 14 and 17. Isn't that interesting? So
Yeah.
this is not something that just happens to girls. This is
Hmm.
something that all young people need to be aware of. And I've thought lots about why is it that boys are more at risk? And it has something to do, I'm sure, with the fact that boys have their guards down because they're not used to being the victim in this way.
Right.
And so I really want young people to understand that anyone, no one is exempt. And in this situation, boys can very easily be victims of sextortion.
Yeah.
The third thing I want young people to know is that sextortion is real. And the way that teachers can convey this to their students is again to share stories, experiences, news stories. And again, these news stories, unfortunately, are devastating sometimes. And so, as teachers, we need to use good judgment in terms of what is going to provide a valuable learning experience for our students and what is going to be unnecessarily traumatizing, right? But, I get calls from parents all the time who want to tell me of their child's experience being sextorted to raise the awareness of other parents to say, hey, this does happen to our kids. A most recent call I got a couple months ago was from a parent of two boys, 15 and 17. And I've known this parent for a number of years. She and her husband are teachers. They're aware, they're up to date. They have all the conversations with their boys. These boys are great kids. They're knowledgeable, they're smart, they're respectful, all the good things. And still, their 15-year-old was a victim of sextortion. It was over the summer, and he had started texting or direct messaging over Instagram with someone who he thought was a girl at a neighboring high school. And so throughout the summer, they texted a lot, especially late at night. They had never met in person, but plans were in place, and things were progressing at a pretty quick rate. One night, after the parents had gone to bed, their son was texting with this girl and she sent some flirtatious sexual photos and asked him to do the same. And at first he was not comfortable and said no. And the conversation went on and she sent some more photos. I use the term she in quotes, because it's usually not. And eventually he caved to the pressure and sent a nude to her. Well, within minutes, the threat started. And within a 20-minute time period, he had sent $800 from his bank account. And when the
Um,
threats got bigger and scarier, thankfully, he woke up his parents and said, I need some help. It happened so
I'm.
fast to the smartest kids and the
Mhm.
most aware and educated families.
Thank goodness, like he accessed a reliable resource. That's one of the skills in the United States that we teach to, like for our health education standards, accessing reliable resources, because that is brave that he went to his parents.
And kudos to his parents,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they had told him over and over, hey, if you get yourself into a difficult situation, especially online, you can come talk to us. And we
Yeah.
promise you will not get in trouble because what's more important than, let's say, you breaking a rule is that we have a chance
Hmm.
to teach with you and that we can support you in any difficult situation you're in. And the same thing would go for watching pornography or other situations where kids can
Hmm.
get in over their head. And this situation was too big for this young person. And thankfully, he knew that he could go to his parents. And this is a message that teachers can convey to their students as well. Of course, some situations will need to be dealt with at the parental level, but teachers can be those reliable sources of support in lots of different situations for their students.
Absolutely. And I want to do a reminder in case a young person is listening, but also a reminder for us as adults that like you said, we're close in age. So when we were growing up, we didn't have this situation. We didn't have this sending messages back and forth through this little thing in our hands. You know, maybe a CD player we listened to or something, but that wasn't communicating to other people. So we don't have the right to judge that when kids make this mistake. This is my value. And I was recently talking with somebody who had some stuff on TikTok that was a little too suggestive for a professional occupation she was considering. And we had to have a conversation about, you know, and we put it up on my computer screen, and I think she was like, whoa, this is kind of embarrassing, you're seeing this. And I shared with her, but I don't have the right to judge this, because I don't know if this was around when I was your age, I don't know if I would have done this. So please, for us as adults, attempt not to shame young people for making a choice like this, because growing up is challenging enough, as we all know. But with all of these other things that can go on, you know, we've all had challenges growing up. Just realize these are going to be different challenges that you don't know what you would have done as a kid. You would have
And
hoped
that's
you would have
it.
made certain decisions.
An important part and a healthy part of growing up is testing boundaries
Yeah.
and expressing ourselves, sexually or not. And we had the luxury of being able to do that in a relatively safe environment,
Hmm. Yeah.
where what we did stayed there, and we didn't need to worry about future employers or people making decisions about university admissions, or our peers taking what they find about us online
Hmm.
and using that to do
Yeah.
damage, or to judge us or to make assumptions about who we are. So absolutely, we as adults live in a totally different world. And, you know, that is the number four thing I would love for young people to understand, is that no one is exempt, and there is no shame, because even adults can be the most informed, well-adjusted adults can be victims of sextortion. It happens all the time. And we know from research, sadly, though, that the number one reason why people of all ages don't report being sextorted is embarrassment.
Right.
So we need to take the shame away from it. And we need to, in doing so, encourage especially young people to get the support of an adult around it. Now, as teachers and as parents, we need to teach our kids to recognize luring and flattery. So
Hmm.
if a young person has started a relationship with someone online, and things get really hot and heavy really quick, with lots of compliments and sometimes even presents, and flattering propositions, or grandiose gestures, we need to be aware of that. We
Right.
also need to teach our kids to trust their gut. If something
Yes.
doesn't feel right, even if we
Hmm.
can't put our finger on it, and this applies to so many different things in life,
Oh, yeah.
even if we can't put our finger on it, our gut tells us something, and it's usually telling us the truth. So
Hmm.
that would be a sign to get the support of an adult, whether that is a teacher or a parent or a relative or an older sibling. Get some support so that you can bounce what you're feeling off them and get their insight too. So we need to teach them to recognize luring, to think critically about who they're communicating with online, to remember that people can very easily pretend they're someone they're not.
Right.
So we need to ask ourselves questions. Would someone my age really talk like this? Would someone my age really want to be engaging in this conversation? Would someone my age have the money to buy me these gifts?
Hmm.
That kind of thing. So thinking critically and not believing everything a person says or does, would be super important. Take it with a grain of salt. Now, if a young person suspects they're being victimized, it would be really important for them to take screenshots of the conversations,
Mm.
save everything, block, and report. And this is a piece that's often missing. We don't talk about, okay, kids, if you're in this situation, here's what you need to do. Don't just shut everything down, because that's sometimes, understandably what we want to do, right? We just want to forget
Absolutely.
it ever happened. We
Mm-hmm.
just deny and move on with our
Yep.
life.
Yep.
But we need to have evidence. We need to take the screenshots. We need to block that person and report for sure right away, and then talk to a trusted adult, knowing, hopefully, that is, that they won't get in trouble.
Right.
So removing, and so again, to reiterate, the number 4 thing I would want young people to know is to remove the shame around being a victim of sextortion, because it can happen to anyone, and it does.
Mm-hmm. And you said you had 5,
Yep.
right?
So the 5th
Okay.
one is to know that there is help beyond talking to our teachers and our parents and other adults that we trust in our life. There is help to get sexual photos offline. So in Canada, we have 2 websites, needhelpnow.ca and cybertips.ca. I know many parents who have used these services, and they get young people's sexual images offline. It really is amazing. They do it quickly and confidentially and without shame. I know that in the US, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children have a program called Take It Down. And they also have a website that is cybertip.org. I'll give you these resources for your listeners afterwards, Lori.
That's
But
great.
these are examples of amazing resources and organizations that can support families who are experiencing being victims of sextortion to at least do damage control, get those photos down. Now, are they able to find the perpetrator? Usually not. They've already moved on to their next victim, but at least we can keep our own kids safe, right?
Yeah.
And you know, lessen the damage. There are also lots of workshops for teens and adults on sexual exploitation in general. Again, I'm going to give you some links as resources.
Thank you.
And for teachers, just a quick search that I did in preparation for our conversation brought up so many amazing lesson plans, videos, fun activities. And I use the word fun loosely because
Mm-hmm.
this isn't a fun topic, but we can talk about it in a way that isn't scary, because we have to,
Right.
right? So there
Mm-hmm.
are so many resources that teachers can access online, not to mention my own resources. As I mentioned earlier, one of my online platforms is called Body Science Online. It's a platform that includes pre-recorded videos and activities for kids kindergarten through grade 7. And in the upper elementary modules for grade 6 and 7 students, we talk about this stuff. And I mean, I have to say, I think I'm pretty funny. I've mastered the preteen sense of humor over the years. They might deny it, but they always laugh at my jokes. Anyway, we can talk about these important yet sensitive topics in a really engaging way. The other online learning platform I have is called Growing Up Game Plan. And both of these include a classroom edition that teachers can literally just plug and play in their classroom. This is more aimed at not necessarily sexual health specifically, although there is a module on puberty. The goal with Growing Up Game Plan is to offer teachers some pre-recorded workshops and activities and resources in the classroom to deal with social and emotional learning. So to empower preteens to really have the information and the skills they need to make smart decisions around being assertive when dealing with bullying and peer pressure, other forms of harassment. Staying safe online, of course, is a big one. We talk about having healthy relationships. What does a healthy relationship look like? And all of these content areas are interrelated, because we know that if kids have the confidence and the inner power and they feel empowered, and the self-worth to if they have all those great things, and if we instill those in our kids from an early age, then those are the ones that are going to be able to make smart decisions and to be able to think critically and to know to get an adult involved when they need to, right? So it's all stepping stones toward the same thing. My point is that there are so many resources that teachers can access. Not to mention, Lori, you're familiar with amaze.org.
Mm-hmm.
It's a website that is a collection of 2 to 3 minute animated YouTube videos on topics not just to do with exploitation, but all things to do with sexual health and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And they're funny and they're engaging and they're just so expertly done in terms of finding
Mm-hmm.
that balance between having humor and respecting that these are really serious topics we're addressing with kids, right? And so I find that especially in my grade 4 or 5 classrooms, these kids, the videos that I show them on the amaze.org website really resonate. And so I encourage teachers to access some of those as well.
How can somebody get in touch with you if they want to hear more about the items that you have created and utilized? What can they do?
They can just go to my website. It's
Okay.
www.saleemanoon.com. I'll make sure your listeners have that. And actually, I'll give you another link because I've created a resource for your listeners on sextortion. These are just, I have a series of 2 to 10 page resources for teachers and parents. And each one deals with a different topic that's relevant to elementary through middle school aged kids. So I want to share with your listeners the one that I've created on sextortion, but really these are, I create them based on what parents and teachers tell me they want to learn more about. And so if your listeners subscribe to my newsletter, they'll receive a new Smart Things to Say resource on a different
Okay.
topic every 2 weeks.
Wonderful.
So this is just another way that I really want to try to give teachers and parents bite-sized chunks of ways that just insight as to how they can have these important conversations with their kids.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure in today's description that all of those links will be there. I'll ask Saleema to just make her list and all, so that'd be
I'll
really
send it
great.
on over. Yeah.
Wonderful. And as we come to the conclusion of our recording today, do you have any last words of advice or information you want to share with our listeners?
I think that as teachers and as parents, our kids have a lot to teach us. And if we can talk a bit less and listen a bit more, we get more insight as to what it's like to be a young person today. Because as we mentioned earlier, there's so much about our kids' lives that we know nothing about. Even for the coolest adult, we just don't know what it's like to live in their shoes. And so we need to judge less and shame less and make fewer assumptions and just listen. Let our kids share with us what they know about what it's like to be them. And we can use that to empower them, again, to make smart decisions. So listen more, talk less.
Thank you, Saleema. Thank you so much for being here today. And for our listeners, I thank you so much for listening in. Please continue to listen to the episodes of the School Health Educators podcast. Please make sure you follow and give us some 5 stars and all. Also, please check out the School Health Educators website. More information is being put up there on the website for us to use as resources in the classroom. For the winter of 2025, I'm going to be adding more onto that website. And last but not least, thank you so much for what you do. You make a difference. You are a valuable resource for our young people. So thank you so much for what you do. You matter. So thanks again for listening in. Would you like to say goodbye to our listeners, Saleema?
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk to you, Lori. So I appreciate you inviting me to come.
Thank you. Enjoy, folks.